fantasy, caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
What's up, guys? Underground Geek here, and man, I was amazed at reading Jean Grey number 10. It's just amazing what you can do when you acknowledge the character and what it is. It's so funny because at first, I didn't really like this comic book for obvious reasons, but it seems like, and it does teeter up and down. It seems like the writer cannot be very consistent. This was really made for the trade back. You can kind of tell that because some of the stories are just bleh. But then you have, like, I think it was issue 4 and maybe issue 7 and then issue 10. It seems like, there's a payoff at the end of these little weird stories. So this issue number 10 is going to be one of those issues that you really need to read if you don't like these new characters. So you might be saying, what do you mean by that? Well, I'm going to show you. Issue 10 here, it has all the different psychics on the front of the page there. They had to throw in the Generation X guy that's a psychic because, that book is just dying. It's fallen under the ground and it's being covered by landfill garbage because no one is reading that book. And so they had to throw him in here just because, they're trying to get some more attention to the book. And really all he did is comic relief. He showed up, did one thing in the last issue, and then this issue he did nothing. So as we get into the story here, the writer is Dennis Hopeless, the artist is Alberto Albuquerque, and the colorist is J. David Ramos. And let's see who some of the editors are. Oh wow, unless this is a girl going by a guy's name, it looks like there's 2 guy editors. Is Chris Robinson a girl or a boy? And then there's Darian Shan, which is the editor. Wow, that is strange. So let's get into this. Basically, we're right in the middle of the action because in the last issue the Phoenix showed up, and the Phoenix showed up early. That was the problem. Jean Grey, which is very confusing at this point. We have this Jean Grey, which is not the real Jean Grey, but she's in our reality. The old Jean Grey is in astral form, trying to help her. And then we have technically another Jean Grey, which is Cable's daughter. His daughter or granddaughter has showed up from the future to help them. So we have all of these almost Jean Grey characters. So they're fighting the Phoenix, which has showed up and pretty much right off the bat started a forest fire. And like she says here, she says, I'm not ready for this. There's probably no such thing as ready for this. I picked a fight with a force of nature, and her first punch is a forest fire. And she says, I do have hope and sort of a plan, but let's be real, this was never smart. And that was, it was good. Then they had to ruin it by saying, today is going to suck. They had to throw those weird millennial quips in there. And then she says, retreat, retreat. And, the Cable's daughter from the future is like, retreat, that means run away. And she says, yeah, I know, that's all we've got. And she says, well, we've been running and that hasn't worked. We have to try something else. And the Jean Grey from the future, which really gets on my nerves, tells the young Jean Grey, the Phoenix is here for you. It's not here for them. And so she stands her ground, makes her psychic weapons, and attacks. And then she says, I'm ready for you. And the Phoenix attacks. She blocks the attack, and then she gets like this baby Nightcrawler. I can't remember this character. Baby Nightcrawler shows up named Pickles and teleports him all the way and saves the day. And so at this point they're at the Cyclops' old bunker, which is up north in Alberta, Canada. And they're basically hiding from the Phoenix in a cold northern place to buy them some time. So here's where it kind of gets on my nerves. Jean Grey from the future is constantly telling the Jean Grey from the past, the young Jean Grey, to leave this crew. She's constantly telling them, leave them. They're all going to die. Leave them, leave them. And I'm like, aren't you like an older version? Aren't you supposed to be more mature? Like, this Jean Grey should be the one saying that. She should be saying, look, y'all just stay here. It's here for me. It's not here for y'all, blah, blah. And then this Jean Grey from the future should be the one saying, look, you need them. Trust me, I've done this before. You need them to fight. And instead, the voice of reason is Emma Frost, which is kind of weird. You know, why is the villain the only one with sense in this situation? But that's the way it is. So she's telling them that they need everybody. And so they head into the bunker. And at that point, they're tracking the Phoenix. And the Phoenix is on its way, and it's running fast. And so they're all talking about what they're going to do. And then, of course, the gay psychic of the group from Generation X makes one comment about how he prefers Jean Grey's hair like this. And we're like, we get it, dude. You're gay. You have a pink faux hawk. And so that's when the Jean Grey from the future, the Cable, I'm just going to call her Cable Jean Grey, she tells him, hey, look out, here it is. So that's when Phoenix like totally burst through the bunker, and I was like, great, it just tore up their bunker. Cyclops is going to be pissed. And so at that point, we get a shot here, and I gotta say, they draw the Cable Jean Grey, like, I don't know if she's supposed to be that much older than this Jean Grey, but they draw her very feminine and very beautiful in her costume. And at this point, I kind of prefer her. But anyway, so she hands the young Jean Grey a weapon, which amps up psychic ability. She uses it on the Phoenix, and it's basically like a cannon. She didn't realize it was going to make that big of a boom, and it blasts a hole right through the Phoenix and weakens it. And then they start their barrage of attacks. It grabs Cable Jean Grey, throws her to the ground, and almost crushes her. And at this point, you know, the future Jean Grey is like, hit it again, hit it again. And she says, you know, she's too close, I'm going to hurt her. And that's when the psychic team, which is composed of Emma Frost and her little underlings, and then the Know Nothing from Generation X, they all band together and make a sort of collar for the Phoenix to hold it back and give it time for Jean Grey to attack it. And I like this here because this Jean Grey makes an outfit to cover herself, and it basically looks like a firefighter outfit. And I was like, that's a pretty neat idea. Like, whoever come up with that was pretty, you know, original. And so she attacks it, stabs it, but then it backfires because basically then you're holding on to a wild animal. So that wild animal runs off, you know, flies away, and then she's basically riding it like a wild bull. The astral Jean Grey runs after her, and she wraps the young Jean Grey wraps a noose around the Phoenix, basically trying to corral it like a bull, and says, I've did my Phoenix homework. I've smelled the burnt flesh. I've tasted the ash. I've seen what you left behind in the minds of others and the other hosts. Nobody ever survives you, so we're going to find out. And that's when she dives the Phoenix into the ground and crashes it. We get a pretty cool shot here of a splash page where the Phoenix just basically crashes into the landscape, blows all the trees back. We see a huge explosion. She says, I'm going to see if you, the Phoenix, can survive me. So she climbs up out of the wreckage, and she says, I'm not the girl I was when this thing started. That girl who wouldn't shut up about nightmares. She would have shattered in the crash. She would have burned up in the flight. Maybe I'm not full grown, full power Jean Grey, but I just gave the Phoenix every single thing I've got. And when we hit the ground, I heard it scream. I felt its fear. That's a very important dialogue right there. It says, maybe I'm not the full grown, full power Jean Grey. So she's acknowledging that she's not the Jean Grey. And then she says, but it wasn't enough. The Phoenix is still alive, so what now? I can't control if I win or lose. No one can. All we can do is stand and fight. And then she makes some more psionic weapons, and she said, this Firebird took my best shot, but it's not over until it takes my last. And that's when the Astral Jean Grey stands in between them and says, stop it. Just stop. The Phoenix, you know, stop and think for once. Consider your options. Look at how strong she is already. Way stronger than I was at her age. Look how hard she's battled. She's only fighting you because she's not ready, because she's still too young. Jean can't handle it. She's not me, not yet. And that's when the Phoenix says, I know. And then she says, but if you merge with her now, you'll burn her up. You'll burn her up. And the Phoenix says, yes, exactly that. And that's when she says, oh no, Jean, run. And that's when the Phoenix gets a hold of the young Jean Grey and says, this is about the worst case scenario right here. About the fight, about the bird and why it came. Makes sense when you think about it. People tell me all the time. And it says, this is where it gets really intense right here. She says, the Phoenix never wanted me. She says, I have her face, I have her hair, I have her name, but I'm not the real Jean Grey. It wanted me out of the way. I was like, holy moly. So then we get this shot here, and this Jean Grey is completely obliterated by the Phoenix Force. Skin and bone all incinerated. All the other psychics are laying there just just destroyed basically. Little Pickles is back there biting his fingernails. And then I don't know if they're dead, because some of these characters have a lot of blood coming out of their face and eyes, and their eyes are rolled back in their head, and it makes you wonder if they're dead. I'm not sure. But then you have the astral form, Jean Grey, just standing there on her own, and then there's nothing left of the young Jean Grey, and the Phoenix Force just flies off. So it was every bit of her intention to get that fake Jean Grey out of the way so that she could have the real Jean Grey again. And so that's where it ends. And it says, read Phoenix Resurrection 1 through 5. And then it says, come back next month for number 11 finale. And it really, this is how some of these characters should be handled. It amazes me that this even got through editing, because either they've got some kind of other story coming up that's really just going to tarnish this one and destroy it, and that was the whole point, something like Ron Mars would do, or one of those other idiots. But it's just crazy, because this Jean Grey, this fake Jean Grey, so to speak, acknowledges that she's not the Jean Grey. The Phoenix Force acknowledges that she's not the real Jean Grey, and basically she's just a holder card till the real Jean Grey comes back. And it's just mind-boggling that they would let this happen, because up until now, all of these new diverse SJW characters, which I know she's not technically diverse, but she's one of these new characters that they've just destroyed the old characters and replaced with new stupid ones. And up until this point, she's just been annoying and had an attitude and constantly in the way. And then now she acknowledges her faults, and she's destroyed by the Phoenix Force for being a fake. And the new Jean Grey is now going to have to come back, or the original Jean Grey is now going to have to come back. And it's kind of crazy. And this comic book has decent artwork. For most of the other Marvel comics that are out there that is just embarrassing, this artist can draw flames and huge scenery very well, and even when you zoom in on some of these pictures, still looks good with the characters drawn. So they obviously zoomed in on the picture and was able to draw with digital, and then go back. But it's like, if you look at this and you look at Despicable Deadpool, and if you look at the new Cable book that just came out, go back to one of my other reviews of the last Cable and zoom in on some of those pictures and look at what I'm talking about with the art. They basically look like stick figures in the background, but this one does really well. And I'm not really a fan of Emma Frost's costume, because it's very generic, basically just wearing white t-shirt and jeans. But the way that they draw her is very well, like the other characters. I like the way that this Jean Grey uses her psionic abilities for weapons. That's very unique to me. It's more like Xavier, and it's something that he would do. And it's just, I don't know, it's just cool. But this book, compared to some of the other books, are just crazy. Can you imagine if they did this to Riri Williams and she was destroyed by someone like the Mandarin? The Mandarin shows up and says, you are not Iron Man, you will never be Iron Man. And she acknowledges that, and maybe sacrifices herself, or something happens to her and she just quits being Iron Man and decides to do something else because she's horribly defeated and the original Iron Man, Tony Stark, has to come back and save the day. They would never do that. But if they did, I think that it would bring sales up in comic books a lot, because this right here actually gets my attention and makes me want to read it. I mean, it's crazy. Why would I want to read a Jean Grey book? I mean, it just makes no sense at all. But when you write stories like this and you acknowledge people's faults, you can relate to them a lot more. And for all the faults in this comic book as far as the writing goes, it still has a good general story, and I like it. So I would give this a recommend. I would say go out and read it. But this is Jean Grey number 10, which is pretty much, we're going to call, the death of Jean Grey. And I don't know, I'm kind of excited to see what's going to happen. But alright guys, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Also, I've got a maker support if you'd like to help me out on that. It's basically Patreon without the liberalism. And also, I'm going to be having a live stream Thursday. I think that's tomorrow, and it's going to be at 7 p.m. Central. And basically, we're going to talk about all the stuff going on in comics from the viewpoint of regular guys, that are not beta males, and we're going to talk about the things that we think about and we talk about in everyday stuff without being this weird kind of group thing. But alright guys, I'll talk to you later. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Underground Geek out.
I wish I knew you when I was young.